If you would like to support Mercado Airwaves, visit us at patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves. Find us on iTunes at Mercado Airwaves. Keep up to date with the show on Facebook at Mercado Airwaves. You can see all of Nicole's work at typingwhentipsy.wordpress.com. Follow Mike on Twitter at mmercado2333 and on Instagram, MikeMercado2333. It's the best night of the week. We hope you're hungry for Pizza Night with Niki and Mike here on Mercado Airwaves. Now, here are your hosts for Pizza Night, Nicole Mancha and Mike Mercado.
Happy Valentine's Day to you all. Thank you for joining us on Pizza Night with Niki and Mike. I'm Mike Mercado, as always joined with the beautiful Nicole Mancha. Nicole, happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day to you.
And happy Valentine's Day to every one of you who are listening to us, whether you're single, married, in a relationship, doesn't matter. Every day is Valentine's Day. But on this one, happy Valentine's Day to you all. And we have a very special episode. It's our Valentine's Day special part 2, our part 2 of our Valentine's Day special. And this one's a pretty cool one. Criminal couples. Nicole has spent all week doing some awesome research. She's giddy. She loves this subject. She binge watches everything that has to do with Monk and Psych and Criminal Minds and Law and Order. Really into this stuff. Kind of scary. Kind of makes me think that she's probably going to kill me at some point. But Nicole, before we get into it, you want to tell us a little bit about the research that you did on this?
Yeah, so a lot of what I wanted to do is I wanted to make it, I guess, a Valentine's theme, in the sense of the couples that we're going to talk about are all criminally involved. So they all are on the other side of the law. They've all committed some very heinous crimes, but, keeping it in the theme of Valentine's Day, what wouldn't you do for the one you love?
Absolutely. So before we get into it, please follow us, be part of the conversation, like us on Facebook at Mercado Airwaves. Subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/Mike Mercado2333, iTunes, iTunes.com/Mercado Airwaves, and SoundCloud, SoundCloud.com/Mercado Airwaves. Nicole, why don't you start off with number 5?
All right, number 5 is going to be Charles Starkweather and Carol Ann Fugate.
All right, the pair started dating in 1956 with a 5-year age difference between the two. At the time that the pair were teamed up, Carol was only 15 years old. Charles' first victim was 2 months before, but the first victim that Carol would be considered an accomplice of was her own family. Starkweather had killed her mother, stepfather, and baby sister in her own home. Fugate claimed to have been scared and worried about retribution, but stayed in the house until neighbors became concerned when the duo fled for Nebraska.
So the two criminals we're talking about here, they had the 5-year age difference, which seems like a really big age difference for us, especially at that specific age when they started dating. But back then it was more common because people actually a lot of times didn't go to high school. So it wasn't rare for this to happen. I was doing a little bit more research this morning, and they actually ended up staying in the house for 6 days with her family.
Gnarly.
Yeah. So in total, Starkweather murdered 11 people. Fugate was an accomplice for 10 of the 11 murders. They also committed a string of robberies while they were on the run, going from Lincoln, Nebraska to Omaha, back to Lincoln, Nebraska. The pair was caught while trying to steal another car. So they had pulled over because Starkweather thought that the car was too hot, which meant it was, stolen. He thought people were going to start to recognize it and realize it. They pulled over, and a man was sleeping on the side of the road. When he tried to steal the car, another driver pulled over to see what was going on, and that's how he got caught, because they started fighting. So then the sheriff pulls over, and Starkweather takes off. Fugate jumped out of the car and said that he was crazy and just killed somebody. Starkweather was caught the following day. They put up blockades all over Nebraska, and he was given the death penalty. Fugate pled innocent but was deemed not so, and ended up spending 17 years behind bars.
What happened with Starkweather? Starkweather.
Yeah, Starkweather. He was sentenced to the death penalty, so they did kill him on death row.
Okay, so he did die.
Yep.
And this was in what state?
This was in Nebraska.
Okay.
In 1956. So it didn't last very long. They were gone for a few weeks, but it was a pretty, it was a gnarly start. And the thing is that when you're reading up on this, the family let him in. So he obviously had a relationship with them that they felt comfortable enough to let him in the house to begin with. And that's, that kind of started the whole thing. So the fact that there was no real thought process that this man could do something like this.
Right. No, it's really crazy. You want to take number 4?
Sure. So number 4 is the Barbie and Ken serial killers, otherwise known as Carla Homolka and Paul Bernardo.
All right, and they met in 1987, getting engaged in 1989, and the pair was only 25 and 19 years old. A weird theme that we're having, still very young. Bernardo was later found out to be the how do you pronounce it? Scarborough rapist, starting his life of crime long before meeting Carla.
Yes.
Okay, so these two are quite a pair already.
Yeah, so the murder spree began quickly. Carla realized that their love life was starting to fizzle out. She had already known that Bernardo was the Scarborough rapist, so she knew of his affinity for attacking women. And as a wedding present, she lured a woman into their home who later became another victim of Bernardo's. And they did kill her as well. The 3 murders were not only heinous, but the third murder was the one that they ended up being caught for. It was of Carla's sister, Tammy. So it was her little sister. Bernardo became obsessed with her, and Carla said that they would do it together. They ended up drugging her and raping her. Bernardo did. And in the whole process, she ended up dying because she choked on her own vomit. Yeah. The whole time when they did call the police and they admitted what they had done, but they had said that it was an accident. She wasn't supposed to die. Later, they found out that Carla kind of had a plan to do it the whole time. She had a plan to kill her sister because she was jealous of the attention that she was getting from Bernardo, her husband. When they were finally caught for their crimes, Bernardo's DNA was linked to the crime scenes, and that's how they ended up finding out he had done all of these other things. And then right before the arrest, he beat Carla with a flashlight. And they do have photos all over. She's broken and bruised. I think he broke her jawbone. It was awful. And that was enough for Carla to tell people that, yep, he's the Scarborough rapist. He did all these things. He committed these murders. And she turned over so quick. He got 25 to life in prison before parole, which is actually coming up this year. And Carla was released in 2005 and is remarried with 3 children.
So what do you think after you did some research on that? Did they both get off kind of light?
I think Bernardo will end up staying in prison for much longer. I think the reason that he only got 25 to life was because they couldn't pin him to every single crime. And unfortunately, with certain crimes, there is a statute of limitations, so he couldn't be tried for all of them. Carla, she changed her name. So she did move. They were from Canada. She moved and changed her name and then married somebody and had 3 children. I just think it's, even if you weren't the person to do it,
your own sister,
and you were so active in it.
And this was a pretty famous case. This is in late 1980s, which is right when the cable news and everything starts getting really big. And were they 2 Caucasians?
Yes.
So okay, and
that's why they're called the Barbie and Ken serial killers, because they were both very attractive. They were very charismatic. People didn't think anything. They were saying that one of the murders that happened was actually they lured a woman into their home right before their family came over for Father's Day dinner, and they put the body in the basement and just left it there while they had dinner. And they said that nobody could go downstairs because they were renovating.
Wow. Did people ever? You know what? I'm going to save this question for the end, but I want you to think about it as we go on through the episode. Do you think there was ever warning signs when it comes to couples? And we'll dig a little deep into that, but I want people to really think about this question that I have as I was reading over the show notes. Are there warning signs, and are these triggers? Do these things triggered because you met the combustible elements of your significant other?
Yeah.
Was that the missing piece? Nicole, who do we have at number 3?
Raymond Fernandez and Martha Beck, also known as the Lonely Hearts Killers.
Met in 1947 through a lonely wanted ad that Beck had posted when she ended up a single mother of 2 kids. Fernandez responded, they became known as the Lonely Hearts Killers. Feel sorry for them, guys. Fernandez had an accident in which she had head trauma. which may have led to part of his desire to kill. Now, before you continue on with this awesome research, for anybody who doesn't know, one of the weird things, if you're into criminology, if you're into anybody who likes mind hunters, anybody who likes Last Podcast on the Left, criminal, anything where they dig deep into the minds of serial killers, one thing that we're starting to really notice is head trauma.
Yeah.
Head trauma is a really big thing, and it makes you really think because of CTE and Chris Benoit, many concussions. A lot of these football players that end up abusing their wives, or they harm themselves in a very traumatic, destructive way. I think it's a very interesting thing that we're learning as the science is getting better.
Yeah, the frontal lobe is what affects your personality, and that's when that kind of trauma happens. They seem to be finding a correlation between the two. And the interesting part is that Beck also had trauma, but it was as a child. So her trauma was physical and emotional abuse and sexual abuse from family members. So because of that, they think it made her more susceptible to these ideas. So as a sign of her undying love and devotion, because back in the 1940s, if you were overweight, they basically made it a hormone problem. That's what they blamed it on. Martha Beck happened to be overweight. She was super promiscuous when she was younger. And because of that, she ended up with 2 kids. But the fathers of the 2 children wanted nothing to do with her. So that's why she had posted that ad. As a sign of her undying love and devotion to Fernandez, though, Beck left her 2 children at the Red Cross to move in with Fernandez. He was struck by this and thought it to be a true sign of her love towards him. Beck knew about these things. This is the interesting part, is that a lot of these women know that these issues are there, or that they have this need to be, to victimize women, and they go along with it. She would actually pose as his sister to assist in luring women into their home so that they could murder them together. But she was extremely jealous. So if Beck ever caught him having sex with any of these women or raping these women, she would actually physically beat them both and fly into a rage before the murder happened, but stayed with Fernandez. They were finally caught in 1949 when they murdered a woman that they had fooled into taking them in, and the neighbors actually called the police because they hadn't seen the woman or her child, and they had buried them in their basement.
They buried the children?
Her and her daughter. Wow. She was a single mother who had her own home, and she opened their doors. She thought they were a brother and sister, and she thought she was helping them out and doing them a favor. Ended up killing her and her daughter and burying them in her own basement. And the most disturbing thing were their final words.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. All right, this is Fernandez. I want to shout it out. I love Martha. What do the public know about love?
And Martha's were, my story is a love story. Imprisonment in the death house has only strengthened my feelings.
So basically, we have couple of the year right here. So for any of you listening to this on Valentine's Day, step your game up. Who's at number 2?
Number 2, Leopold and Loeb, because we do not discriminate here. So we have a gay couple.
There you go. The 2 men grew up on the south side of Chicago in the early 1900s. They knew each other, but did not grow close until they attended the University of Chicago together. They both were taught to be extremely intelligent individuals. They became close in school when they both realized they were obsessed with conducting the perfect crime.
So the idea of concocting a perfect crime was a Nietzschean thought, is that the supermen were able to do things like that, to make something so perfect you couldn't put holes into it. So Leopold was originally the one who wanted to pursue a sexual relationship with Loeb. Loeb didn't allow his advances at first. However, he soon relented with the compromise that they would commit the crimes together. So obviously we can see that Leopold was definitely the more subservient one and willing to do whatever Loeb wanted. They started their crimes out simply with petty theft and vandalism, but it wasn't exciting for them. It wasn't something that was getting them caught. It wasn't anything that was really getting any newsworthy. And that's really what Loeb was looking for, was newsworthy. The duo deliberated for 7 months until they had come up with their perfect crime, which was the kidnapping and murder of 14-year-old Bobby Franks, who was actually a cousin of Leopold and lived across the street from him. After they were caught, it was due to a pair of glasses that were found at the crime scene. Now, DNA was not a way to find criminals at this point.
It wasn't a thing.
No, it wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
The only reason that they were caught really were able to be charged with this crime was 2 reasons. Leopold's glasses were there, And it wasn't that the glass frames were unoriginal. It was that the specific hinge that was part of the glasses, only 3 people were able to afford. And he was one of the 3. And when they found the typewriter then that was used for the kidnapping letter was also in Leopold's name because he had borrowed it.
Wow.
So it was really those 2 that traced it back.
Sure.
And the pair soon turned on each other, and they said it was the other's idea, and the one was just the driver. So if it was Loeb, he said he was just driving. If it was Leopold, he said he was just driving. Strangely, though, after they were in prison, they were still continuing their relationship.
After selling each other out.
After selling each other out, they still continued their relationship, and they were still extremely close friends. While in prison, they also expanded the school system behind bars until Loeb was actually killed by another inmate, and Leopold lived on. But true love knows no bounds, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, you could throw each other up the river, and these are some interesting couples. Before we get to number 1, when you were reading this, did you feel icky?
I wish I could say I did. But I think it's so interesting to read these things, especially because you see a lot of crime that happens, and it tends to be men, murderers, serial killers, rapists. They tend to be male-based. The fact that they were able to get their women in on this and be able to kind of create this sick love and this way to, it's almost like a bond that they had together because they shared it together. And it's so interesting how you find people like that. And then like the Lonely Hearts Killers, obviously they both had issues. And how do you even find each other? How does that happen?
Before we get to number 1, why don't we take a quick break? This has been really cool. We'll get to number 1. We'll discuss probably the most famous couple of all time when it comes to criminal couples here on Pizza Night with Niki and Mike. I'm Mike Mercado. She's Nicole Mancha. Keep it tuned into Mercado Airwaves.
Mercado Airwaves is brought to you by supporters at patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves. If you would like to support Mercado Airwaves, visit us at patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves. Find us on iTunes at Mercado Airwaves. Keep up to date with the show on Facebook at Mercado Airwaves. You can see all of Nicole's work at typingwhentipsy.wordpress.com. Follow Mike on Twitter at mmercado2333 and on Instagram, Mike Mercado 2333.
All right, Nicole. At number 1, it is the Joker and Harley Quinn. No, who is number 1?
Bonnie and Clyde.
Might as well be Joker and Harley. Bonnie met Clyde in 1930, right before he was sent to prison for 2 years. After he was let out, they reunited and began their spree. They committed robberies across 5 states with each other and the Barrow Gang?
The Barrow Gang.
So what is the Barrow Gang?
That was Clyde's gang of thieves. So that was the gang that he had started before he met Bonnie, and that was how he had kind of gotten into his life of crime.
Oh, so he was a hoodlum. Including these robberies, they murdered at least 13 people and often kidnapped police officers, driving them around for hours and dumping them unharmed hundreds of miles away. So were they just doing that to get kicks?
Yeah.
Wow.
Like they were just doing it because it was fun. And think about it. It was 1930. So people weren't getting caught for things the way they were here. It wasn't happening, especially nowadays. There was no real way to catch them unless you actually caught them. So it's interesting because while this couple was known for robbing the rich and powerful and these banks and all these things, they actually hit more small businesses and mom and pop shops on their spree. But when I was doing my research and I was thinking, like, how are they known for this, like, Robin Hood kind of...
I was going to just ask that, like, why are they so beloved? That's, like... I mean, I guess the same thing as, like, Al Capone is, though, right? Like, there's just this... Martin Scorsese has made it cool to love gangsters.
But I think it's also, at the time when all this was happening, think about it. The only news that you're going to hear is about the big banks hitting big towns. Nobody knows what happens to Joe and Ann, who are in a gas station on Route 83 when there's no news stations. There's really no newspapers in those areas. There's no outlets that are really focused on those little crimes. They're not newsworthy. It's the large ones, and the large ones happen to be bank robberies and robbing the rich. You know what I mean? That's what makes news, not the mom and pop stores, which is still kind of happens to this day. So the fact that it was 1930 and they didn't have Facebook,
right,
so that you can know everything that's going around, that's probably why they didn't get nearly as much publicity for that. Interesting fact, though, is Clyde previously wanted to be in the Navy but was rejected, and Bonnie was a talented writer. And it's interesting to think what would have happened if he was actually accepted and Bonnie furthered her dreams of being a writer. Because if Bonnie would have met Clyde when he was in the Navy, it might have had a totally different turn for how they decided to, run their lives. Another interesting fact was that Bonnie was previously married right before her 16th birthday. Her husband was thrown into jail in 1927, and though she ran off with Clyde after that, 3 years later, she met Clyde 3 years later in 1930, and 5 years later ran off with him. She never officially divorced her first husband when he was incarcerated.
What was he in jail for, do you know?
Robbing a bank.
So she had a type. She had a type, okay.
Yeah, but when she died, they actually found her with her wedding ring on from her husband, because I don't think Clyde ever bought her a ring. And she actually, another weird thing is she had her name plus Roy, which was her ex-husband's name or estranged husband's name, tattooed on her inner thigh.
Really?
Yeah, and tattoos weren't
like that commonplace.
not for women anyway.
Right, like especially for women at that point.
So anybody who knows the Bonnie and Clyde story know that the two died together in a police shootout. The car was shot up with over 100 rounds, and they were actually buried separately. Bonnie's mother hated Clyde and thought he was a terrible influence on her. So her last thing to kind of stick it to them both was to separate them in death.
Interesting.
Yeah. And the car that they were actually killed in is full of bullet holes, and it's in a casino in Nevada on the California border.
So the mother thought that he was the bad influence, but like, could you argue she was the bad influence? Because she does have a type, and he found the woman that kind of gets, because he was already heading down that path. So it's like that gasoline and that fire mixing together.
Well, think about it. He was already sent to prison the minute he met Bonnie, and literally 2 weeks later was in prison.
Right.
That he had been tried for.
So he was already a bad dude.
He was already a bad dude. Yeah. I think that no parent wants to think poorly of their kids, right? And I mean, think about it. Her first husband was sent to jail, so it's not like this was a...
Did they ever kill any cops?
You know what? That was something I couldn't find. I think there might have been one, but I'm not 100% positive. I know they like to really screw with the police, which is why they would take them and drive them all around and drop them off.
Boy, like that seems very excessive, almost Godfather-like, where like 100
It was a full shootout.
But like, were they shooting the cops too?
Yeah, they were shooting at them.
Okay.
So it was a full-blown shootout. And like I said, they did what they wanted and they died together.
That's very interesting. So, all in all, when looking back at these, do you believe that these couples were, each individual was destined to be this type of person where they were going to harm others? Or do you think it was the cocktail of the mixing that created these infamous couples?
I think it's a cocktail. I think that some people are just not good people, but then there's some people who, we're talking about people, some of them like in the 1930s, 1950s, where even now we've been talking about it, where mental health is not really addressed. And so we don't know the kind of people they were. We don't know the kind of children they were. Maybe they were children who you could tell, like, there are kids who have no real emotions, and you don't know. So a lot of that information isn't necessarily, it's not that it's not there, it's just hard to say because there's nobody around to tell the story. But then you meet, you have the people like the Barbie and Ken serial killers, where it seemed like Carla came from a decent home. Like, she, it wasn't always roses, but it's interesting that you can come from a good home and still have a lot of issues, and
right,
or be so susceptible to that kind of mental, like these men that kind of took the women in and convinced them to do like these crazy things and these heinous crimes. There's obviously something that's not right. Why
do you think society and pop culture is so fascinated with these type of couples, including somebody who wasn't on here, but like an Elaine Bornos, I can't pronounce her last name, but the movie they made Monster about with Charlize Theron? Like, why do you believe that people are so fascinated with couples?
I think a lot of times people are fascinated just in general by crime, because I don't like to use the term normal, but I'm going to now because it's the best way kind of to describe this scenario, is that normal individuals and normal people, and the way you grow up, right from wrong, you have a moral compass. And these people did not have it, or they were able to skew it to the point where they felt little to no guilt about these things. And so I think it's interesting to people to see how they get there or what they're doing and how they can commit these crimes and be okay with themselves the next day. I mean, the biggest thing is like Karla Homolka. She now has 3 children. She's raising her children.
Right.
What if one of her daughters did that to the other?
Right.
Like, think about it. Like, the fact that you can move on with your life. That's what blows my mind.
Is there any couple on the list or anybody that you maybe delve into that didn't make the cut that really stuck out?
There were so many. It's crazy that there are some that, you know, they're bad and they're terrible, but some of the ones I couldn't stomach. Like when it had to do with like harming children specifically and that kind of predatory thing, that was something that I just couldn't stomach at the time. But I guess one of the ones was probably the first one, Charles Starkweather and Carol Ann Fugate. A lot of people didn't believe her. A lot of people thought that even though she said she was not guilty, how could you not know? And she said, well, he was threatening me and all these things. But she stayed in the house for 6 days.
Yeah.
You know, and at 15 years old, you're making, you know what I mean? Like, how does your mind get so twisted? Even at 20 years old, how does your mind get so twisted in this that you can move forward with these kind of crimes?
No, very intense stuff. Any last thoughts thinking of this kind of Valentine's Day special we did 2 weeks last week? A very light episode. We were able to hopefully help you guys get prepped for Valentine's Day, getting some cool presents. Check that out if you want to get ready for next year. Go ahead and check the archives for that. But, you know, I think this was a really, really fun episode in the idea of, like, you know, talking about these people, because we like to make urban legends and these myths of these people, and really they're just kind of sick individuals that happen to find each other.
Yeah, I think that, you know, I love to do research, so this for me was kind of a really cool way to do some of the things that I enjoy and also delve into this kind of other side of things. And I really wanted to kind of make it a little darker, pull out some info and history and kind of talk about these couples, because I think it is more interesting when you have these couples who have a relationship with one another and how they kind of navigate that.
Do you think they had normal dinners, normal conversations? Like, do you think it's like they think it's normal, so they're just having normal day-to-day?
Some of these people seem to have really normal lives. I mean, you know, and I come back to them a lot because they were one of the ones who didn't, you know, rob anybody or do anything like that. So I think they were able to keep it a little less on the, you know, they keep more on the DL. But Karla and Paul, like, they had dinners with her family. They had brunches on Sundays. Like, they did all of these things with her family and stuff while they literally had a dead body in the basement.
Right.
The murder of her sister Tammy happened on Thanksgiving weekend when they were staying with them. So they had very normal things that happened every single day in their lives. And somehow they were able to distort and really twist how they wanted their lives to go. I mean, I think in the end of it is they may have found something in each other that they loved for whatever reason, and that's sick, twisted love. But Karla was already bringing women home for Paul because he was losing interest, because I don't think psychopaths can love, and I think that's what he was. So I think the reason he was drawn to Karla is because he knew how subservient she would be to make him happy. And that's not being in love, that's the idea of love and the idea of somebody who would do anything for you. That's
very intense, and that is the lengths people go with those type of things. This was a really heavy episode, really fascinating, and before we get out of here, a huge thank you to Nicole for doing so much amazing research for us to be able to do this episode. I had a lot of fun kind of going down this little spooky thing on Valentine's Day. Nicole, before we do get out of here, favorite Valentine's Day chocolate?
The Trinidad's from Fannie Mae.
Best way to spend Valentine's Day?
eating Chinese food in your underwear.
Wonderful. Thank you guys so much. Hopefully that's what you're doing on this Valentine's Day. You can follow us everywhere in the universe. I'm on Twitter at mmercado2333. She's at nmancha89. You can like us on Facebook at Mercado Airwaves. Subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/MikeMercado2333. Subscribe to us on iTunes, itunes.com/Mercado Airwaves. Every single one of our shows and interviews are brought to you by our amazing producers over at patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves. If you would like to get your ad brought outside a huge, diverse group of audience, visit us right there. We have a great tier for you. That's patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves. We're on Instagram if you would like to see behind the scenes. Instagram.com/MikeMercado2333. And of course, we're on SoundCloud. SoundCloud.com/Mercado Airwaves. Thank you again to the lovely Nicole Mancha for joining us. Thank you to each and every single one of you. We will see you next time here on Pizza Night with Niki and Mike. She's Nicole Mancha. I'm Mike Mercado. You're on the Mercado Airwaves Network.
If you would like to support Mercado Airwaves, visit us at patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves. Find us on iTunes at Mercado Airwaves. Keep up to date with the show on Facebook at Mercado Airwaves.
You can see all of Nicole's work at typingwhentipsy.wordpress.com.
Follow Mike on Twitter at mmercado2333 and on Instagram, MikeMercado2333.
Mercado Airwaves is brought to you by supporters at patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves.
Thanks for joining us here on Pizza Night with Niki and Mike, here on Mercado Airwaves.